A bombshell name drop during testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking and racketeering trial. Why were singers Usher and Ne-Yo brought up in the courtroom? We're diving into the connection these A-listers and music legends have to the now disgraced music mogul, and what the night in question that a witness claims they were in attendance for means to how this trial could play out.
A bombshell moment unfolded during the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking and racketeering trial when two major names surfaced in testimony, Usher and Ne-Yo. Their mention wasn't part of headlines or accusations, but it instantly changed the temperature in the courtroom. For years, Diddy's image seemed polished and untouchable, surrounded by powerful figures in music and Hollywood. But as this trial continues, that image isn't collapsing all at once. It's cracking quietly in places few were looking.
Of big names in Hollywood and the music industry, that's not breaking news, but it was a bit of a surprise this week when Usher and Ne-Yo's names came up during testimony. The witness that brought up Ne-Yo and Usher was Dawn Richard. She was once a member of the singing group Danity Kane. That group was signed to Diddy's label, Bad Boy Records, and she also sang for another bad boy group called Diddy Dirty Money. Sean Combs was actually part of that group. It was a trio. They had a few songs that came out between 2009 and 2011. Prosecutors called Richard to testify. Now, before I get into the moment where Usher and Ne-Yo were brought up, I want to take you through her testimony and what led to the point that she brought their names into this. Now, Richard told prosecutors in 2009 she witnessed Sean Combs allegedly attack his then girlfriend Cassandra Ventura, the singer known as Cassie, who has already testified in this trial that she was abused by Combs physically and sexually during their 10-year relationship that ended in 2018. Now here's a line in the transcript where Richard said, quote, "I observed Cassie being attacked," and then when asked who attacked Cassie, she answered, quote, "She was attacked by Sean Combs." In the incident in 2009 that Richard talked about, she said she was recording music at Combs' LA home. Cassie was making eggs, and then Combs comes downstairs, quote, angry, and was saying where the expletive was his eggs. Excuse my language. And he was telling Cassie that she never gets anything right, where the expletive is his food, and he proceeded to come over to her, took the skillet with the eggs in it, and then tried to hit her over the head with it, and she fell to the ground. Richard told prosecutors that she witnessed Diddy allegedly attack Cassie multiple times, physically beating her. And while she was a member of Diddy Dirty Money between 2009 and 2011, she said it was frequent that she would see these things. She said that Combs would, quote, punch her, choke her, drag her, slap her in the mouth. I saw him kick her, punch her in the stomach. Now, when it comes to Usher and Ne-Yo, their names are brought up related to an incident in 2010 that happened at a restaurant in California. Dawn Richard was asked about this incident both by the prosecution and defense, but it's interesting how her answers and the details she gives are different depending on the questions that are asked. Richard was asked about that incident. It was in West Hollywood, California. There was a restaurant, a dinner with a lot of powerful people in 2010. And at that dinner, Richard says Diddy allegedly punched Cassie in the stomach. She said, quote, "We were having a private conversation, and when we're all sitting, eating at the tables together, when I say we, I mean some bad boys, some of our other label, and some celebrities were in the room, and they were secretly arguing, and he punched her in the stomach. Sean Combs punched her in the stomach." The prosecution then asks, quote, "Who, if any, of Mr. Combs' employees were present?" And Richard says Harv Pierre, Capricorn Clark, Mia, D-Rock, Bonds, myself, and Kalina Harper. Now the prosecution then asks Richard about Harv Pierre. He was a bad boy executive and he answered to Sean Diddy Combs. The prosecution also asks how, quote, employees reacted to Combs allegedly punching Cassie in the stomach, to which Richard answered,
The testimony came from Dawn Richard, a former member of Danity Kane and Diddy Dirty Money, both signed under Bad Boy Records. Richard told prosecutors she witnessed Diddy repeatedly abuse his then-girlfriend Cassie Ventura between 2009 and 2011. She described violent incidents, punching, choking, dragging, moments she says became disturbingly common while she worked closely with him. These allegations echoed Cassie's own testimony and painted a picture of normalized fear behind closed doors.
Richard said celebrities were at that restaurant, but the prosecution didn't really follow that line in their questioning. They did ask about bad boy employees who were present at the restaurant, to which Richard named people like Combs, the bodyguard D-Rock, Pierre the executive. But then the defense had their chance at cross-examination, and through their questioning, is when we saw those big names drop. The defense asked Richard, please tell me who was all at this restaurant. Richard answers, Harv Pierre, Capricorn Clark, Mia, and myself, Kalina, our bodyguards, which was Bonds, and D-Rock, Cassie. The question continues with the defense asking, you remember who was all there, right? And Richard says, mm-hmm. The defense asks, do you recall alleging several celebrities were actually there? And Richard says yes, and the defense then says, quote, so when the government asked you who was all there, and I asked you who was all there right now, you didn't mention any of the celebrities, right? Right, Richard says. The defense then asks Richard to name the celebrities. And then she says, quote, Usher was there, Jimmy Levine was there, Neo came through, there were a few others too. I don't recall those people, but those are the ones I remember talking to. The defense then pressed Richard a bit, asking why she didn't say those names before when she was asked about who was there by the defense. And Richard says she was just repeating what she told the government in their direct examination. Usher and Diddy go back decades. Usher lived with Combs for a year, actually, when he was just a rising star in the music industry. He was 13, 14 years old at the time. Usher actually spoke about living with Combs in an interview 8 years ago on the Howard Stern show. Here's part of what he said.
You're going to go to Puff Daddy's. He's going
in the 90s. Do you understand what that's like?
Puffy's place was like just filled with chicks and orgying like nonstop, right?
No, not really. I mean, but hey, it was curious. I got a chance to see some things.
Now, as far as Grammy winner Neo, he is someone who has been known to be a friend of Diddy and to be in the same social circles over the years. He faced backlash for a comment he made in the wake of Diddy's arrest during a performance in New Zealand last year, where he reportedly said, quote, on stage, I was sexually assaulted and I liked it. I had a great time and I'd do it again. He later apologized for that and said, quote, in an attempt to be playful with my fans, I made an insensitive and irresponsible joke while on tour, and I'd like to truly apologize from the bottom of my heart. This is according to the UK media outlet, The Metro. Now, the other name that Richard mentioned was Jimmy Levine. He is a music legend. He is known as the co-founder of Interscope Records, so an incredibly powerful person in the music industry. It's important to note that in her testimony, Richard did not specifically say that any of the three actually witnessed that alleged moment where Combs punched Ventura in the stomach, but she did say that they were allegedly there that night. Now, none of the three have released statements since their names were brought up in court. Combs is on trial. He's expected to be on trial for roughly 7 more weeks. He's charged with racketeering, sex trafficking by force, and transportation to engage in prosecution. He has pleaded not guilty. Joining us now once again to talk about this case is former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson-Ferrer. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Usher's name, he comes up yesterday, and that was kind of a moment where people clearly recognize who Don Richard was talking about. What should we take away from that anecdote and the fact that Usher's name was brought up?
The fact that Usher's name was brought up, I think one of two things.
One incident from 2010 stood out. Richard testified about a dinner at a restaurant in West Hollywood where she claims Diddy punched Cassie in the stomach while seated among industry insiders. Initially, she listed only bad boy employees who were present. But during cross-examination, the defense pressed further, and that's when the names dropped. Richard stated that Usher, Neo, and music executive Jimmy Iovine were also at the restaurant that night. She did not say they witnessed the alleged assault, only that they were there.
About it. On one hand, it's irrelevant. It doesn't go to prove or disprove whether Mr. Combs is guilty of the charges as alleged in the indictment. On the other hand, I do think that it provides background information that there were other individuals that could have possibly observed these alleged assaults or attacks on Ms. Ventura. Not only that, but if the government intends on establishing a timeline or a pattern of events with respect to Mr. Combs, his enterprise, and their dealings with individuals from the public or in the industry, it's good to note that the allegation, or at least the testimony came in, that Usher was involved with Mr. Combs early on in his career when he was approximately, I believe, 14 years of age, that he had gone to some sort of academy through Mr. Combs' enterprise or business. And the government can certainly use that to show a long pattern of behavior dealings that he may have had with other individuals in the industry, and also to establish that Mr. Combs and Ms. Ventura had this longstanding relationship, that not only, there were a select few that got to observe, but that publicly some of these allegations or allegations of violence happened, and that other people observe those things.
And when we look at the transcript, and I have it here, and you have the defense asking why Richard did not talk previously in conversations with the government about Usher being there, Jimmy Levine, who's a famous producer, as well as the singer Neo. Should we take anything away from that it appeared that their names didn't come up earlier when she was having conversations with the government?
Yeah, what we can take away, and what the defense is essentially trying to do here, is really strike at her credibility. What the defense did during its cross-examination is say, well, these other individuals were there and you didn't disclose their names until now. And why was that? If you are participating in a government investigation, you're presumed and you should tell the truth, the whole truth, and the full truth. And you failed to disclose a significant thing, which were the other individuals that were present. You failed to disclose that to the government. And now it's only today, as you're testifying, that we're just now hearing of these other individuals, Usher Raymond, Neo, and other executive producers that were involved or possibly witnesses to the case. Again, striking at her credibility because she did not tell the full truth at the time she was asked by the government, which later down the line during closing arguments, the defense can get up and say, Ms. Richard testified A, B, and C to you. However, she failed to disclose X, Y, and Z, and that's why you shouldn't believe her. That's why you should not give her the credibility that the judge is going to instruct you on, and the jury can take that into consideration.
And one thing that's been apparent throughout all the witnesses thus far is clearly this was a relationship that had a lot of domestic violence incidents, but this isn't a domestic violence case. Yet it seems like there's a lot of people who witnessed physical abuse. And in this case, you have Usher and Neo. I mean, these are A-list celebrities who are seeing Sean Combs punch his girlfriend allegedly in the stomach, which is something that you would think if you saw that, on the outside, if you think you'd stop that, you would step in, you would say something, but apparently they didn't, according to Don Richard's testimony. Does any of that, the fact that he was doing this out in the open, play towards taking some of the domestic violence incidents, but showing that it was a much larger thing, which is what the government's trying to prove?
So with respect to the other individuals being present, although there's an allegation that they were present, and they're not really allegations, it's just background facts, I don't know that Ms. Richard has testified that they actually observed the striking. Maybe they did, maybe they did not.
The mention of these celebrities doesn't automatically prove wrongdoing. But legally it matters. Their presence could support the prosecution's argument that alleged violence wasn't always hidden, that it occurred in environments where others may have observed troubling behavior. At the same time, the defense used the late disclosure of these names to challenge Richard's credibility, arguing she failed to tell the full story earlier. The courtroom tension made one thing clear: silence itself has become part of the evidence.
I don't think that that's going to do any benefit for the government as far as knowing that these things happened more broadly. I mean, it's clear as day that this case is rooted in domestic violence, that Mr. Combs was domestically violent towards Ms. Ventura, whether it was isolated behind closed doors and just Ms. Ventura, and a close select few were testifying to this, or on a grander scale where, a select few and publicly people can testify or people have observed these allegations, whether it was just one or whether it was many. Testimony is evidence, and whether that was testimony from one person or testimony from multiple people, the jury can still consider that as evidence in determining whether Mr. Combs is guilty or not guilty. If these individuals observe that, then, the hope would be that someone would have intervened earlier on. But again, it doesn't negate the fact that, the charges here are racketeering, sex trafficking, and things of that nature. One of the things the government is alleging is the use of force. So I think that's why we continue to hear this domestically violent line of questioning. And I think the government is hoping that the jurors will view this as satisfactory to the element requiring requiring force, physical force of violence.
Yeah, and to your point, I'll just looking at this transcript, you're right. Yeah, it's Usher was there, Jimmy Levine was there, Neo came through. So it's saying that they were there, not necessarily that they witnessed the abuse that Dawn Richard said happened at this dinner. What did you make of her testimony now that she's off the stand?
It was pretty interesting testimony. I don't know that she was a necessary witness, although the government deemed her to be necessary. Ms. Ventura got on the stand and testified about the abuse, testified about what happened to her. Ms. Richard seemingly came up behind her and corroborated for the government those allegations. And I don't think there was even a question about that. The hotel footage came into evidence. Ms. Ventura testified, so now Ms. Richard is here testifying to more allegations of domestic violence. And the government has to be really careful here, because the way that it is being painted at this point is that this is a domestically violent case, which is true. But the government needs to prove a RICO. They need to prove sex trafficking. They don't need to prove domestic violence, and it can certainly confuse the issues with the jury and ultimately land them in a verdict of not guilty.
I know some of the evidence that the government will point to, some of frequent flyer accounts, credit cards, bank accounts. We haven't really heard a lot about that as of yet. How do you see the government, now that they've really established, whether it's Cassie's testimony, some things that Dawn Richard has said about the domestic abuse, the violence that was in this relationship, where do they go from here if they are going to paint this picture of a RICO, which is essentially what they need to do in this trial if they want to get a conviction?
Yeah, so what the government's going to continue to do is put on their witnesses. I think that they got a witness on the stand that worked for Mr. Combs at a certain point in time. That individual also testified to some alleged violent behavior on behalf of Mr. Combs. I think if this individual is still testifying, or as other individuals continue to testify, we will start to hear about transportation with regard to these alleged sex workers. So one of the things that the government has to prove and show is that there was a transportation via interstate commerce, which is a very wide net and catch-all for the government in order to seek a conviction, is that these individuals were transported or traveled via interstate commerce from one state to another. So we may hear testimony about frequent.
This case isn't just about one man. It's about a system where power rewrites reality. Witnesses describe an environment where discomfort was reframed as opportunity, silence as loyalty, and fear as professionalism. What's emerging isn't loud or theatrical, it's quiet, heavy, and unsettling. These testimonies suggest that abuse didn't survive because no one knew, but because speaking up felt impossible. And once those cracks appear, no image, no matter how powerful, can fully hold together again.